Daniel Hayes sat in a dying van with $17 to his name and a court summons that could erase him from his daughter's life forever. He had two choices: face the system that had already failed him, or disappear into the kind of silence that swallows men whole. Then a stranger with storm gray eyes knocked on his window and asked if he was heading west. He said yes. That single word would unravel everything he thought he knew about survival, redemption, and what it means to stop running. If you're watching this, drop a like and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The apartment smelled like burnt coffee and broken promises. Daniel Hayes stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the eviction notice like it might change if he looked hard enough. 3 days, 72 hours to produce $1,200 he didn't have, or he'd be on the street again. He folded the paper in half, then in half again, creasing it with the kind of precision that came from having nothing else to control. Outside, the March wind rattled the window frames of the fourth-floor walk-up he'd been calling home for 8 months. The radiator clanked uselessly in the corner. The landlord had stopped fixing things around the time Daniel's check started bouncing. 32 years old. Electrician by trade when there was work. Single father when the court allowed it. Currently, broke, exhausted, and one bad decision away from losing the only thing that mattered: his daughter. Emma was 6. She had his dark hair and her mother's sharp mind and a laugh that could crack him wide open. He got her every other weekend, supervised visits only, because 18 months ago he'd made the mistake of being honest with a family court judge about his finances. Apparently, "I'm doing my best" wasn't good enough when your best included a string of late rent payments and a truck repossessed in a grocery store parking lot. The custody hearing was in 9 days. His ex-wife's lawyer had already made it clear, if Daniel couldn't demonstrate residential stability, Emma would stay with her mother full-time. Permanent custody. Supervised visits replaced with nothing at all if Vanessa decided he wasn't worth the hassle. He couldn't blame her. She'd remarried a tax attorney named Craig, who wore boat shoes without irony and owned a house with a yard. Emma had her own room there, painted yellow, with bookshelves Craig had installed himself. Daniel had seen the photos on Vanessa's Facebook. He'd studied them like evidence of his own inadequacy. What did he have to offer? A studio apartment he was about to lose, a 1998 Dodge van held together by rust and stubbornness, a phone with a cracked screen and a voicemail box full of messages from creditors. The eviction notice sat on the counter beside his keys. Daniel picked up both and walked out. The van started on the third try, coughing black smoke into the cold morning air. He sat behind the wheel, hands shaking, and tried to think. There was no one to call. His parents were dead. His brother lived in North Carolina and hadn't returned a text in 4 months. The friends he used to have, the ones from before the divorce, before everything fell apart, had quietly drifted into lives that didn't include late-night calls from a man who couldn't get his shit together. He could go to a shelter. He'd done that before, after Vanessa kicked him out. 3 weeks sleeping on a cot that smelled like disinfectant and despair, listening to men cough and cry in the dark. He'd promised himself never again. He could fight, show up to court, explain to the judge that he was trying, that he loved his daughter more than his own breath, that residential instability was just a fancy term for being poor and punished for it. Or Daniel turned the key. The engine caught, shuddered, settled into a rough idle. Or he could leave. Not forever. Just long enough to think, long enough to breathe, long enough to stop feeling like the walls were closing in and the world was a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. West. He'd always meant to see the West. Montana, maybe. Or Wyoming. Big empty spaces where a man could disappear without anyone noticing or caring. He pulled out of the parking lot before he could talk himself out of it. By noon, he was 200 miles from the city, driving through flat gray farmland under a sky the color of old concrete. The highway stretched ahead like a dare. He had half a tank of gas, $17 in his wallet, and a credit card that had been declined at a gas station 3 exits back. His phone buzzed. Vanessa. He let it ring, then buzzed again, a voicemail. He didn't listen. The van's heater worked intermittently, blasting hot air for 10 minutes before cutting out entirely. Daniel drove with his jacket zipped to his throat, hands tight on the wheel, mind a blank hum of white noise. He wasn't thinking. Thinking was dangerous. Thinking led to turning around. At a rest stop just past the state line, he pulled in to use the bathroom and splash cold water on his face. The mirror showed a man who looked older than 32. Stubble edging toward a beard, eyes bloodshot from 3 hours of sleep, a scar above his left eyebrow from a bar fight he barely remembered. He looked like his father. That was the worst part. The old man had died broke and bitter, worn down by a lifetime of work that never added up to enough. Daniel had sworn he'd be different. Turned out genetics were a hell of a thing. He bought a cup of burnt coffee with his last $5 and sat at a plastic table near the vending machines watching families come and go. A father hoisting a toddler onto his shoulders, a mother wiping a smudge of ketchup off a little girl's cheek. People who'd figured out the trick Daniel had missed, how to hold on. He checked his phone. Another missed call. This time, his lawyer. He powered it off. Back in the parking lot, he stood beside the van and stared at the highway. The sun had dropped behind a bank of clouds, and the temperature was falling fast. He should find somewhere to sleep. A motel, maybe, if he could scrape together enough cash. Or just pull off somewhere quiet and recline the driver's seat until morning. That's when he saw her. She was standing near the entrance to the rest stop, backpack slung over one shoulder, thumb out like she'd been hitchhiking since the invention of the interstate. Early 20s, maybe. Long dark hair pulled into a messy braid. A green canvas jacket 2 sizes too big. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking past him, at the road, at the western horizon, at something Daniel couldn't see. He should have kept walking. Instead, he stopped. She turned her head. Her eyes were gray, sharp, like she could see through the rust and desperation straight to whatever was left underneath. "You heading west?" she asked. Her voice was low, calm, like this was a normal question and not a gamble that could end a dozen different ways. Daniel hesitated. "Maybe. I need a ride. I'm not a taxi." "I didn't ask for one." She adjusted the strap on her backpack. "I'm just asking if you're going west. If you are, I'd like to come along. If you're not, I'll wait for someone else." There was no pleading in her tone, no desperation, just a simple transaction offered without expectation. Daniel looked at her, really looked. She didn't seem scared, didn't seem high or drunk or running from the kind of trouble that followed people into rest stop bathrooms. She seemed tired and certain, like she'd already made up her mind and was just waiting for the world to catch up. "Why?" he asked. "Why what? Why do you need a ride? Why west? Why me?" She smiled just a little. "Does it matter?" "Yeah, it does." "Fair enough." She tilted her head, considering. "I'm leaving something behind. You look like you are too. Figured we might as well leave together." He should have said no. Should have told her to find someone else, someone safer, someone who wasn't 3 bad choices away from rock bottom. But there was something about the way she stood there, calm, unbothered, like the universe owed her nothing, and she was fine with that. That made him feel a little less alone. "I've got $12 left," he said. "Van's falling apart. I don't know where I'm going or when I'm coming back." "That's fine." "I'm serious. This isn't a road trip. This is me running out of options." "I know." She stepped forward, holding out her hand. "I'm Lila." He shook it. Her grip was firm. "Daniel." "Nice to meet you, Daniel." She glanced at the van. "That thing actually run?" "Most of the time." "Good enough." She walked past him, opened the passenger door, and climbed in like she'd already decided this was happening. Daniel stood there for a moment, keys in hand, wondering what the hell he was doing. Then he got in and started the engine. Patex. They drove in silence for the first hour. Lila sat with her backpack on her lap, staring out the window at the fields rolling past. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, hands at 10 and 2, trying to ignore the absurdity of having a stranger in his van while he fled his own life. "You don't talk much," she said eventually. "Neither do you." "Fair point." She shifted in her seat. "You got a plan?" "Not really." "You just driving until the van dies?" "Something like that." She nodded like this made perfect sense. "Where were you before this?" "A city I can't afford anymore." "Family there?" "A daughter." That got her attention. She turned to look at him, eyes narrowing slightly. "You leave her behind?" "It's complicated." "It always is." Daniel's jaw tightened. "What about you? What are you running from?" People who think they own me. Family? Sure, let's call it that. She didn't elaborate. Daniel didn't push. They lapsed back into silence, the only sound the hum of the engine and the wind rattling the van's loose panels. Somewhere past the Iowa border, the sky opened up. Rain came in sheets, pounding the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Daniel slowed to 40, then 30, squinting through the deluge. The van hydroplaned once, tires skidding sideways before he corrected. Lila didn't flinch. "You always this calm?" he asked. "You always this tense?" "Yeah," she smiled. "Figures." He pulled off at the next exit, tires splashing through standing water, and found a gravel lot beside a shuttered diner. The rain hammered the roof like fists. Daniel killed the engine and exhaled. "We'll wait it out," he said. "Smart." They sat there, surrounded by noise and water, and for the first time since leaving, Daniel felt something other than panic. Not peace, not relief. Just a brief, fragile pause. "You hungry?" Lila asked. "Broke." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a granola bar. "Here." He hesitated. "I can't take it." He did. It tasted like cardboard and sugar, and it was the best thing he'd eaten in days. "Thanks," he said quietly. "Don't mention it." The rain drummed on. Outside, the world was dark and drowned. Inside, two strangers sat together and pretended they weren't both running from ghosts. By nightfall, they'd crossed into Nebraska. The rain had stopped, leaving the highway slick and black under a sky full of stars. Daniel's back ached from hours behind the wheel. His eyelids were heavy. He needed to stop, but stopping meant spending money he didn't have. Lila must have sensed it. "Pull over." "I'm fine." "You're about to pass out. Pull over." He found a rest area 10 miles down the road and parked beneath a flickering streetlight. The lot was empty except for a semi idling in the corner. Daniel reclined his seat and closed his eyes. "You plan to sleep in here all night?" Lila asked. "Unless you've got a better idea." "Not particularly." She pulled a blanket from her backpack, thin, worn, but clean, and draped it over her lap. Daniel watched her from the corner of his eye. She didn't seem bothered by the cold or the discomfort. She just settled in, arms crossed, and stared out at the stars. "You do this a lot?" he asked. "What?" "Hitchhike. Sleep in vans." "More than I'd like." "Why?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Because staying still felt like dying." Daniel understood that. He didn't say so, but he understood. "Gimisi." He woke to the sound of knocking. Disoriented, stiff, he sat up and saw a highway patrol officer standing beside the driver's window. Daniel's stomach dropped. He rolled the window down. "Morning," the officer said. Middle-aged, graying mustache, eyes that had seen every excuse in the book. "Everything okay here?" "Yeah, just resting." The officer glanced at Lila, who was awake now, watching him calmly. "This your vehicle?" "Yes, sir." "License and registration." Daniel handed them over, pulse hammering. The officer studied them, then looked at the van. Rust, dense, a back bumper held on with duct tape. "You live in this thing?" "No, just traveling." "Where to?" "West." "That's not specific." "Haven't decided yet." The officer handed back his documents. "Van's in rough shape. You know your left taillight's out?" "I'll get it fixed." "Make sure you do. I catch you on the road after dark without it. I'm pulling you over." He tapped the roof twice. "Drive safe." He walked back to his cruiser. Daniel waited until he was gone before exhaling. "That was close," Lila said. "Yeah." "What would have happened if he'd run your plates?" "Nothing good." She didn't press. They pulled back onto the highway and kept driving. The first real fight happened in South Dakota. They'd stopped for gas. Daniel using the last of his cash, Lila contributing a crumpled 10 she pulled from her pocket, and the pump clicked off at half a tank. Not enough to make it to the next town. Not enough to matter. Daniel slammed his fist against the van's hood. "Easy," Lila said. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't tell me to calm down. Don't tell me it's fine. It's not fine." She leaned against the van, arms crossed. I didn't say it was fine. I said easy. There's a difference. We're stuck in the middle of nowhere with no money and a tank that won't get us 50 miles. What exactly do you want me to do? Figure it out, like you've been doing. I don't have anything left to figure out. His voice cracked, louder than he meant. A woman pumping gas 2 lanes over glanced at them and quickly looked away. Lila didn't flinch. She just watched him, calm and steady, until his breathing slowed. "You done?" she asked. "Yeah." "Good. Because I've got an idea." She walked into the gas station and came back 5 minutes later with a $10 bill and a man's business card. "What did you do?" Daniel asked. "Sold him my lighter, vintage Zippo. He collects them." "You just happen to have a vintage Zippo?" "I've got a lot of things I don't need anymore." She handed him the 10. Daniel stared at it. "I can't take this." "You already did." He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her he wasn't a charity case, that he didn't need her saving him. But the truth was, he did, and she knew it. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You're welcome." They drove on. Somewhere in Wyoming, the van started making a noise. It wasn't the usual rattle or clank. This was deeper, grinding, like metal chewing itself apart. "That's bad," Lila said. "I know. We should stop." "And do what? I don't have money for a mechanic." "Then we pull over and take a look ourselves." Daniel gritted his teeth but pulled onto the shoulder. He popped the hood and stared at the engine like it might confess its sins. Oil was leaking from somewhere. The serpentine belt looked frayed. The whole thing smelled like burning rubber. Lila peered over his shoulder. "Can you fix it?" "Maybe. If I had parts and tools and time." "How long?" "I don't know. A day? 2? She looked at the empty highway stretching in both directions. "We're not making it 2 days out here." He knew she was right, but admitting it felt like surrendering. "We could flag someone down," she suggested. "Get a tow into the nearest town." "With what money?" "I've still got a few things I can sell." Daniel turned to face her. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Helping me. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Lila met his eyes. "You let me in your van when you didn't have to. That counts for something." "That's not enough." "It is to me." Before he could respond, a truck slowed and pulled onto the shoulder behind them. Daniel tensed. A man climbed out, 60-something, flannel shirt, grease-stained hands. Farmer, maybe. Or rancher. "You folks need help?" he called. Daniel hesitated. Lila stepped forward. "Engine trouble," she said. "You know anything about old Dodge vans?" The man walked over, looked under the hood, and whistled low. "She's hurting. You got a blown gasket, maybe worse. I can tow you into town if you want. My brother runs a shop." "We don't have money for a tow," Daniel said flatly. The man shrugged. "Didn't ask for any. I'm heading that way anyway." Daniel stared at him, waiting for the catch. There was always a catch. "Why?" he asked. The man smiled. "Because I've been where you are. And someone helped me once." He stuck out his hand. "Name's Earl." Daniel shook it. "Daniel. Well, Daniel, let's get this thing moving." Earl's brother's shop was a cinder-block garage on the edge of a town so small it didn't have a stoplight. The mechanic, a younger, rounder version of Earl, took one look at the van and shook his head. "She's done," he said. "Can you fix her?" Daniel asked. "Sure, for about $1,500. Daniel's heart sank. "I don't have that." The mechanic sighed. "Look, I can patch the gasket and get you another 100 miles, maybe 2, but after that, you're gambling." "How much for the patch?" $200. Daniel looked at Lila. She pulled out her backpack and started rifling through it. She came up with a silver bracelet, a pocket watch, and a small leather-bound notebook. "I can sell these," she said. "Lila, don't argue." She walked across the street to a pawn shop. Daniel watched her go, feeling useless and angry, and something else he couldn't name. Earl clapped him on the shoulder. "She's a fighter. Yeah. You're lucky." "I don't feel lucky." "You will." Talking. Lila came back with $180. The mechanic did the work for $150 and told them to drive carefully. They got back on the road as the sun dipped below the mountains. Daniel drove in silence, gripping the wheel too tight, jaw clenched. Say it, Lila said. Say what? Whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking I shouldn't have dragged you into this. You didn't drag me. I asked to come. You didn't know what you were getting into. Neither did you. He glanced at her. Why are you really here, Lila? She looked out the window. The mountains were turning purple in the fading light. Because I needed to leave, she said quietly, and you needed someone to stay. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he just drove. That night, they camped beside a river. No money for a motel. No gas to keep driving. Just the van, a sky full of stars, and the sound of water moving over stones. Lila built a small fire from dead wood. Daniel sat on the bumper and watched the flames. You ever think about going back? She asked. Every minute. What stops you? Fear? He said it without thinking, then realized it was true. I'm afraid if I go back, I'll lose her for good. And if you don't go back, I lose her anyway. Lila poked the fire with a stick. Sounds like you're stuck either way. Yeah. So what's the point of running? Daniel didn't have an answer. She looked at him across the fire. You love her? More than anything. Then maybe running's not the answer. Then what is? Showing up. He wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that showing up, broken, empty-handed, barely holding on, would be enough. But he'd tried that before, and the world had made it very clear love didn't pay the rent. Love didn't prove stability. Love didn't win custody hearings. It's not that simple, he said. I know. They sat in silence. The fire crackled, the river whispered, and for the first time since leaving, Daniel let himself imagine a different ending. Not a happy one. Not a perfect one. Just one where he didn't give up. Tick. The next morning, Lila was gone. Daniel woke to find her backpack missing, the passenger seat empty, no note. Panic hit him like cold water. He climbed out of the van and looked around. Nothing but trees and river and silence. Then he saw her. She was standing at the water's edge, barefoot, jeans rolled to her knees. Her braid had come loose. She looked young, fragile, human in a way she hadn't before. He walked down to join her. Thought you left, he said. I thought about it. Why didn't you? She turned to face him. Because I'm tired of leaving. Daniel understood. He was tired too. Tired of running, tired of failing, tired of pretending he could outpace the consequences of his choices. I think I need to go back, he said. I know. I don't know if it'll work. It might not. But I have to try. Yeah, you do. She picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. It bounced 3 times before sinking. What about you? Daniel asked. What about me? Are you coming back with me? Lila smiled. Where else would I go? They turned the van around and started east. The engine groaned. The road stretched long. But for the first time, Daniel wasn't running. He was heading home. And he wasn't alone. The drive back felt longer than the drive out. Maybe it was the weight of what Daniel was heading toward. A courtroom. A judgment. The very real possibility of watching his daughter's face disappear behind a closing door. Or maybe it was just the van, which now sounded like it was chewing gravel with every mile. The patch job had bought them time, but not much. Every grinding noise made Daniel's chest tighten. Lila sat in the passenger seat with her feet on the dashboard, staring at the highway like she was reading something written in the asphalt. She hadn't said much since they'd turned around. Daniel didn't push. He was learning that silence with Lila wasn't awkward. It was just space. Room to think without having to explain yourself. They crossed back into Nebraska late in the afternoon. The sky was bruised purple, threatening rain. Daniel's phone, which he'd turned back on somewhere near the Wyoming border, had been buzzing non-stop. 12 missed calls from his lawyer, 6 from Vanessa. 3 voicemails he still hadn't listened to. You gonna check those, what? Lila asked, nodding at the phone in the cup holder. Eventually. Eventually's getting pretty close. I know. She reached over and picked up the phone, holding it out to him. Want me to listen? Tell you what they say? No, yeah, I don't know. He rubbed his face with one hand, keeping the other on the wheel. What's the point? I already know what they're gonna say. Maybe. But not knowing for sure is worse than knowing for sure. He hated that she was right. Fine. Listen. Lila pressed play on the first voicemail. A woman's voice, clipped and professional. His lawyer. Daniel, it's Patricia. I need you to call me back immediately. The court moved your hearing up. It's now in 4 days. If you don't show, they'll rule in Vanessa's favor by default. Call me. Lila glanced at him. 4 days. I heard. She played the next one. Vanessa this time, her voice tight. Daniel, where the hell are you? Patricia said you're not answering. If you're trying to make this harder than it needs to be, congratulations. Emma asked about you yesterday. I didn't know what to tell her. Call me back. Daniel's jaw clenched. Lila paused before playing the third message. You want me to stop? She asked. No, keep going. The third was Patricia again, angrier now. Daniel, I don't know what you think you're doing, but disappearing right before a custody hearing is the worst possible move. The judge is already skeptical. Don't give him a reason to write you off completely. I can't help you if you don't call me back. The last one was Vanessa. Her voice was quieter this time, almost tired. Look, I don't know where you are or what you're doing, but Emma misses you. She doesn't understand why you haven't called. I know things are hard right now, but running doesn't fix anything. Just come back, please. Lila set the phone down. Daniel drove in silence, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. 4 days, Lila said again. Yeah, that's not a lot of time. I know. You got a plan? Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. Show up and hope I don't look like the kind of guy who just spent a week living in his van. You are the kind of guy who just spent a week living in his van. Thanks, that's helpful. She shrugged. I'm just saying, lying's not going to work. You need a different angle. Like what? The truth. The truth is I'm broke, homeless, and barely hanging on. Right, and you turned around anyway. She looked at him. That's got to count for something. Daniel wanted to believe her. But he'd been in enough courtrooms to know that intent didn't matter. Results did. And his results were a repossessed truck, an eviction notice, and a bank account with 63 cents in it. I don't think the judge is going to see it that way, he said quietly. Then make him see it. How? I don't know, but you've got 4 days to figure it out. The rain started just after sunset, light at first, then heavier. Daniel pulled off at a rest stop and they waited it out in the van, listening to the water hammer the roof. Lila had fallen asleep with her head against the window, her breath fogging the glass. Daniel watched her for a moment, wondering who she'd been before this. Before the backpack and the hitchhiking and the running, she'd mentioned family, people who thought they owned her. But she'd never said more than that. He wanted to ask, but asking felt like crossing a line they'd both been careful to avoid. So he just sat there, listening to the rain, and tried not to think about what would happen in 4 days. By morning, they'd made it to Iowa. Daniel's back ached from sleeping in the driver's seat. His neck was stiff. His mouth tasted like stale coffee and regret. Lila woke up slowly, stretching, blinking at the gray light filtering through the windshield. Where are we? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. Iowa, maybe 3 hours from the city. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. You sleep at all? A little. Liar. He smiled despite himself. Yeah. They found a gas station with a bathroom and a vending machine. Daniel washed his face in the sink, staring at his reflection. He looked like hell. 2 weeks of stubble, bloodshot eyes, a man who'd run out of places to run. When he came out, Lila was leaning against the van with 2 cups of coffee and a pack of peanut butter crackers. Breakfast, she said, handing him a cup. Where'd you get the money? Found some change in the cup holder. That was for gas. We've got enough gas. You need coffee more. He wanted to argue, but the coffee was warm and bitter and exactly what he needed. They sat on the curb and ate the crackers in silence, watching semis roll in and out of the lot. You nervous? Lila asked. About the hearing? Yeah. Terrified. Good. He looked at her. Good? Means you care. If you weren't scared, I'd be worried. Daniel took a sip of coffee. What if I screw it up? What if I say the wrong thing or the judge doesn't believe me or Vanessa's lawyer tears me apart? Then you get back up and try again. That's easy to say. No, it's not. It's the hardest thing in the world. She crushed her empty coffee cup and tossed it toward a trash can. It bounced off the rim and landed on the ground. She got up, picked it up, and dropped it in properly. But it's the only thing that matters. They got back in the van and kept driving. The city appeared on the horizon just after noon, a skyline of glass and concrete rising out of the flatland like a broken promise. Daniel's chest tightened. He hadn't been gone long, barely 2 weeks, but it felt like years. Everything looked smaller somehow, dirtier, more crowded. "Where to?" Lila asked. "I don't know. I got evicted, remember?" "Right. So where are you staying?" "I haven't thought that far ahead." "Daniel." "I know, okay? I know." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'll figure it out." "You got friends here? Someone who'd let you crash?" "Not really." "Family?" "Dead or useless." She was quiet for a moment, then, "What about a shelter?" "I'd rather sleep in the van." "You can't show up to court looking like you're homeless." "I am homeless." "I know. But the judge doesn't need to." Daniel hated that she was right. Again. They drove through the city, past streets Daniel used to know, past buildings he'd worked in, past the park where he used to take Emma on Saturdays. Everything felt familiar and foreign at the same time, like a memory that didn't quite fit. He pulled into the parking lot of a public library and killed the engine. "What are we doing here?" Lila asked. "Thinking." "About what?" "How to not look like a disaster in 4 days." Lila got out and stretched. Daniel followed. Inside the library, it was warm and quiet and smelled like old paper. They found a corner table near the back and Daniel pulled out his phone. He stared at Patricia's number for a long time before finally pressing call. She answered on the second ring. "Where the hell have you been?" "Driving." "Driving where?" "West. It doesn't matter. I'm back now." There was a long pause. "You have 4 days, Daniel. 4. Do you understand what that means? If you don't show up looking like you have your life together, you're done. No more weekends, no more supervised visits, nothing." "I know." "Do you? Because you just disappeared for 2 weeks without a word. That's not the behavior of someone who's taking this seriously. I am taking this seriously." "Then prove it. Get a place to stay. Get cleaned up. Get a job, or at least make it look like you're trying to get one. And for the love of everything, do not tell the judge you've been living in your van." "What do I tell him?" "That you've been staying with a friend, that you've been looking for work, that you're stable and ready to be a father." "That's a lie. It's a strategy. There's a difference." Her voice softened, just slightly. "Look, I know this is hard, but the court doesn't care about hard. They care about results, so get results." She hung up. Daniel set the phone down and stared at the table. "What'd she say?" Lila asked. "That I need to stop looking like a mess." "Well, she's not wrong." He glared at her. She grinned. "Come on," she said, standing up. "Let's go fix this." They spent the rest of the afternoon at a thrift store on the east side of the city. Lila picked out a button-down shirt, a pair of khakis, and a tie that didn't look too dated. Daniel tried them on in the cramped fitting room, staring at himself in the mirror. He looked like someone pretending to be an adult. "Better," Lila said when he came out. "I look ridiculous." "You look employable. That's what matters." She paid for the clothes with money Daniel didn't ask about. They left the store and walked down the street, past storefronts and bus stops, and people who didn't look at them twice. "You know what you're going to say?" Lila asked. "To the judge?" "Yeah." "Not yet." "You've got 4 days." "I know." "So start thinking." That night, they slept in the van behind a grocery store. Daniel lay in the driver's seat, staring at the ceiling, running through speeches in his head. Every version sounded desperate. Every version sounded like begging. Maybe that's what it was. Lila shifted in the passenger seat. "You awake?" "Yeah." "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why'd you leave?" "Really?" Daniel was quiet for a long time. "Because I was afraid if I stayed, I'd have to watch everything fall apart in slow motion, and I couldn't do that." "But you came back." "Yeah." "Why?" "Because leaving didn't fix anything. It just made it worse." She nodded in the dark. "That's what you tell the judge." "What?" "That you left because you were scared. That you came back because you realized running doesn't work. That you're ready to fight." "You think that'll be enough?" "I don't know. But it's the truth. And the truth's better than nothing." The hearing was on a Thursday. Daniel spent the 3 days leading up to it trying to look like someone who had his life together. He showered at a truck stop, shaved in a gas station bathroom, ironed his thrift store shirt in the library parking lot using a travel iron Lila had bought for $6. On Wednesday night, he called Vanessa. She picked up immediately. Daniel? Yeah, it's me. Where have you been? Away. But I'm back now. Emma's been asking about you. His throat tightened. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't help. I know that too. There was a long pause. Are you going to show up tomorrow? Yes. Are you going to be okay? I don't know. That's honest, at least. She sighed. Look, I don't want to take her away from you, but I can't keep doing this. She needs stability. She needs to know you're not going to disappear. I'm not going to disappear. You already did. I came back. This time. What about next time? There won't be a next time. You don't know that. You're right, I don't, but I'm going to try anyway. Vanessa was quiet. Then, good luck tomorrow. She hung up. Daniel sat in the van, phone in his hand, and let himself feel the full weight of what was coming. In 12 hours, he'd be standing in front of a judge who held his entire future in his hands. A man who didn't know him, didn't care about his excuses, and had 100 other cases to get through. Lila was sitting on the curb outside, smoking a cigarette she'd bummed from a stranger. Daniel got out and sat beside her. You okay? She asked. No. Good. You shouldn't be. He looked at her. Why are you still here? What do you mean? You could have left any time. You didn't have to come back with me. You didn't have to help. So why did you? She took a drag, exhaled slowly. You ever feel like you've been running so long you forgot what you were running from? Yeah. Me too. And then I met you, and you were running too, but you stopped. You turned around, and I thought, maybe I could do that too. So you're using me? She smiled. Maybe a little. Fair enough? They sat there in the dark, two people who'd found each other by accident and stayed by choice. Thursday morning came too fast. Daniel woke up at 5, too anxious to sleep. He dressed in the thrift store clothes, checked his reflection in the van's side mirror, and tried to ignore the panic clawing at his chest. Lila made him eat a granola bar. You need food. You're shaking. I'm fine. You're not. Eat. He ate. They drove to the courthouse in silence. Daniel parked 2 blocks away, hands trembling on the wheel. He sat there for a moment, staring at the building. You ready? Lila asked. No. Good. Let's go. Inside, the courthouse smelled like floor polish and fluorescent lights. People in suits hurried past, carrying briefcases and files. Daniel felt like an imposter, like everyone could see through the cheap shirt and borrowed confidence straight to the man underneath. Patricia was waiting outside the courtroom. She looked him up and down, then nodded. You clean up okay? Thanks. You remember what we talked about? Yeah. Don't volunteer information. Answer the questions. Be respectful. And whatever you do, don't lose your temper. Got it. She glanced at Lila. Who's this? A friend, Daniel said. Patricia raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Fine. She can wait outside. Lila squeezed Daniel's arm. You've got this. He wanted to believe her. The courtroom was smaller than he'd expected. Vanessa was already there, sitting with her lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd never missed a meal. She glanced at Daniel, her expression unreadable. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Daniel's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might crack a rib. The proceedings started. Vanessa's lawyer went first, painting a picture of a stable home, a loving mother, a child who deserved consistency. He mentioned Daniel's eviction, his disappearance, his lack of steady employment. Every word landed like a punch. Then it was Patricia's turn. She talked about Daniel's love for his daughter, his willingness to fight, his commitment to being present. She didn't mention the van. She didn't mention the 2 weeks spent running. She framed everything in the best possible light. Finally, the judge looked at Daniel. Mr. Hayes, I'd like to hear from you. Daniel stood. His mouth was dry. His hands were shaking. Your Honor, I know I've made mistakes. A lot of them. I lost my job. I lost my apartment. I ran when I should have stayed. But I came back. Because my daughter is the only thing that matters. And I know I'm not perfect. I know I don't have much to offer right now, but I'm trying, and I'm not going to stop trying. The judge studied him for a long moment. Mr. Hayes, trying is admirable, but this court needs more than good intentions. What assurances can you give me that you won't disappear again? Daniel took a breath. I can't promise I won't mess up. I can't promise everything's going to be easy, but I can promise I'll show up every time, no matter what. The judge made a note. We'll take a brief recess. Daniel sat down, legs weak. Patricia leaned over. That was good. Was it? We'll find out. 20 minutes later, the judge returned. After reviewing the evidence and hearing from both parties, I'm prepared to make a ruling. Daniel's heart stopped. Mr. Hayes, I'm granting you supervised visitation rights with a review in 6 months. If you can demonstrate stability and consistent involvement, we'll revisit the custody arrangement at that time. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Daniel exhaled, feeling the air return to his lungs. Outside the courtroom, Lila was waiting. She looked up when he came out. Well? I get to see her. She smiled. Told you. Daniel's first visit with Emma was scheduled for Saturday at 10 in the morning. Supervised, which meant a social worker would sit in the corner of a sterile room at the Family Services building and take notes while Daniel tried to be a father in 60-minute increments. He spent Friday night in the van, unable to sleep, running through everything he wanted to say to her. Apologies, explanations, promises he wasn't sure he could keep. By the time the sun came up, he'd convinced himself he was going to ruin it. Lila found him sitting on the curb outside a convenience store, staring at a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. You look like hell, she said, sitting down beside him. Thanks. When's the visit? 2 hours? You eat anything? Not hungry. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a pack of crackers. Eat anyway. He took them, but didn't open them. What if she doesn't want to see me? Then you deal with it. That's not helpful. You want helpful or you want honest? I don't know, Lila sighed. Look, I don't know your kid, but if she's anything like you, she's probably just as scared as you are. So show up, be honest, and stop expecting it to be perfect. What if I say the wrong thing? You will. That's part of it. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to make you feel human. She stood up, brushing dirt off her jeans. Come on, let's get you ready. The Family Services building was a squat brick structure on the north side of the city, wedged between a laundromat and a used car lot. Inside, it smelled like industrial cleaner and sadness. Daniel signed in at the front desk, hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen. The social worker was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a clipboard. She introduced herself as Margaret and led him down a hallway to a small room with a table, 2 chairs, and a bin of toys that looked like they'd been donated in the 90s. Emma will be here in a few minutes, Margaret said. I'll be sitting over there. Try to relax. Relax. Right. Daniel sat in one of the chairs and stared at the door. Every second felt like an hour. He smoothed down his shirt, then messed it up again because it looked too stiff. He rehearsed his opening line. Hey, sweetheart, I missed you. And it sounded fake even in his head. Then the door opened and Emma walked in. She was taller than he remembered. Or maybe he'd just forgotten how small 6-year-olds were supposed to be. She had her hair in 2 braids and she was wearing a purple jacket he'd never seen before. She stopped just inside the doorway, looking at him with wide, uncertain eyes. Daniel's throat closed up. He tried to smile, but his face felt frozen. Hi, Emma, he managed. She didn't move, just stood there, clutching the straps of her backpack. Margaret stepped in gently. It's okay, sweetie. You can sit down if you want. Emma looked at Margaret, then back at Daniel. Slowly, she walked over to the table and sat in the chair across from him. She set her backpack on the floor, but didn't say anything. Daniel swallowed hard. You look good. I like your jacket. Mom got it for me. It's nice. Silence. Emma picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. Daniel felt like he was drowning in the quiet. I'm sorry I haven't been around, he said, the words tumbling out too fast. I know it's been a while, and I know that's hard, and I wanted you to know that I didn't want to be away. I just had some stuff I needed to figure out. Emma looked up at him. Where were you? I was traveling, trying to get my head straight. Mom said you left. I did, but I came back. Why? The question hit him like a hammer. Because I missed you. Because you're the most important thing in my life. She studied him for a moment, her face unreadable. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She slid it across the table. It was a drawing. A stick figure man and a smaller stick figure girl holding hands. Above them, in shaky crayon letters, it said, "Me and Dad." Daniel picked it up, his hands trembling. "Did you draw this?" "Yeah, for you." He couldn't speak. He just stared at the drawing, at the bright colors and the crooked smiles, and felt something crack open inside his chest. "I love it," he said quietly. "Can I keep it?" "Yeah." "Thank you." Emma nodded. Then, after a long pause, she said, "I missed you too." Daniel's vision blurred. He wiped his eyes quickly, trying to hold it together. "I'm not going anywhere, okay? I know I messed up, but I'm going to be here every time they let me." "Promise?" "Promise." She smiled, just a little. It was the best thing Daniel had seen in months. They spent the rest of the hour talking. Emma told him about school, about her friend Mia who could do a cartwheel, about the chapter book she was reading. Daniel listened like his life depended on it, memorizing every detail, every word. When Margaret stood up and said their time was over, Emma hugged him. It was quick, almost shy, but it was real. "See you next time?" she asked. "Absolutely." She left with Vanessa, who'd been waiting in the lobby. Vanessa gave Daniel a brief nod. Not warm, but not hostile either. It was the closest thing to approval he'd gotten from her in 2 years. Outside, Lila was leaning against the van, smoking. She looked up when Daniel came out. "How'd it go?" He held up the drawing. "She made me this." Lila smiled. "That's good." "Yeah, it is." They got in the van and drove in silence for a while. Daniel felt lighter, like something heavy had been lifted off his shoulders. Not gone, but easier to carry. "You did good," Lila said. "I didn't do anything. I just showed up." "That's the hardest part." That night, they slept in the van behind a grocery store. Daniel taped Emma's drawing to the dashboard where he could see it. He stared at it for a long time before finally closing his eyes. The next morning, reality hit again. Supervised visits were a start, but they didn't pay rent. Daniel still didn't have an apartment, still didn't have a job, still didn't have a plan beyond surviving one day at a time. Lila was awake before him, sitting on the curb with a notebook and a pen. She looked up when he climbed out of the van. "Morning," she said. "What are you doing?" "Making a list." "Of what?" "Things we need to fix." He sat down beside her. The list was short but brutal. Housing, income, transportation that didn't sound like it was digesting itself. "You forgot one," Daniel said. "What?" "Food." She added it. "Okay, so how do we tackle this?" "I don't know. Get a job, I guess." "Doing what?" "Electrical work. That's what I used to do." "Can you still do it?" "If someone will hire me." "Then that's where we start." They spent the next 3 days hitting every contractor, electrician, and handyman service in the city. Daniel filled out applications, made calls, knocked on doors. Most places didn't call back. A few told him they weren't hiring. One guy looked at the van Daniel had pulled up in and said, "Come back when you've got reliable transportation." It was humiliating. Every rejection felt like proof that he was stuck, that no matter how hard he tried, he'd never climb out of the hole he'd dug. But Lila didn't let him quit. Every morning, she handed him a list of new places to try. Every night, she sat with him while he vented his frustration into the dark. "Why are you doing this?" he asked one night. "Doing what?" "Staying, helping. You don't owe me anything." "I know." "So why?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because I've been where you are." And no one stayed. Daniel wanted to ask what she meant, but something in her tone told him not to push. On the 4th day, he got a call back. A small contracting company on the south side needed someone for a short-term gig, rewiring a commercial kitchen. It wasn't steady work, but it was something. "When can you start?" the foreman asked. "Tomorrow." "You got tools?" Daniel hesitated. His tools had been in the truck when it got repossessed. "I can get them." "Make sure you do. I need someone who knows what they're doing, not someone I have to babysit." "I know what I'm doing." "Good. See you at 7." Daniel hung up and stared at the phone. Then he turned to Lila. I got a job. That's great. I need tools. How much? A basic kit? Maybe $200. Lila pulled out her backpack and started rifling through it. She came up with a silver ring, a pair of earrings, and a leather wallet. No, Daniel said. You've already sold enough. It's fine. It's not fine. I can't keep taking from you. You're not taking, I'm giving. There's a difference. She stood up. Come on, let's go find a pawn shop. The tools cost $180. Lila covered it without hesitation. Daniel felt like he was drowning in debt he could never repay, but she didn't seem to care. You'll pay me back when you can, she said. What if I can't? Then you can't. It's not the end of the world. The job was hard. 12-hour days in a kitchen that smelled like grease and industrial soap, running wire through walls and ceiling spaces barely big enough to fit his shoulders. His back ached. His hands were raw. But the work felt good. Real. Like he was building something instead of just surviving. The foreman, a grizzled guy named Rick, didn't talk much, but he knew his trade. He watched Daniel work for the first few hours, then nodded. You're not bad, Rick said. Thanks. You looking for steady work, or just this gig? Steady, if you've got it, Rick grunted. I might. Finish this job without screwing it up, and we'll talk. Daniel finished the job in 3 days. Rick offered him another one, then another. By the end of the month, Daniel was working 5 days a week, pulling in enough to start saving. It wasn't much, but it was a start. With steady income, the next problem was housing. Daniel couldn't keep living in the van, not if he wanted the court to take him seriously. He needed an address, a mailbox, something that screamed stability. Lila helped him search. They scoured Craigslist, drove through neighborhoods, looked at apartments that ranged from overpriced to outright unlivable. Most landlords wanted first and last month's rent plus a deposit. Daniel didn't have that kind of money yet. Then Lila found a listing for a room in a shared house, $300 a month, utilities included, no deposit required. It was on the east side, in a neighborhood that had seen better days, but the landlord, a retired teacher named Mrs. Kovacs, seemed more interested in finding someone reliable than someone wealthy. You work? She asked when Daniel came to see the place. Yeah, electrician. Steady? Getting there. She looked him over, then at Lila. She your girlfriend? Friend, Lila said quickly. Mrs. Kovacs nodded. I don't care what you do as long as you pay on time and don't make noise after 10. You interested? Daniel looked at the room. It was small, barely big enough for a bed and a dresser, but it had a window and a door that locked. It wasn't much, but it was a roof. Yeah, he said. I'm interested. Good. You can move in tomorrow. That night, Daniel and Lila sat in the van one last time. He'd taped Emma's drawing to the dashboard months ago, and it was still there, faded, but intact. You did it? Lila said. We did it. No, you did. I just helped. He looked at her. Where are you going to go? I don't know yet. You could stay. Mrs. Kovacs said the couch in the common area is up for grabs if someone needs it. Lila smiled. You offering me your couch? Yeah, I am. She thought about it for a moment. Okay, but just until I figure out my next move. Deal. They shook on it. Moving in took less than an hour. Daniel didn't have much. Some clothes, the tools, a duffel bag of essentials. Lila had even less. They carried everything up the stairs and set it down in the small room that was now Daniel's. Mrs. Kovacs knocked on the door later that evening with a plate of cookies. Welcome, she said. If you need anything, I'm downstairs. Daniel took the cookies. Thank you. She nodded and left. Lila sat on the floor, her back against the wall. This is nice. It's a room. It's more than a room. It's yours. Daniel sat down beside her. I couldn't have done this without you. Yeah, you could have. No, I couldn't. She looked at him. You would have figured it out. You always do. I don't know about that. I do. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the past few months settling over them like dust. Daniel thought about how far he'd come, from a man running west with nothing to someone with a job and a room and a chance. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. But it was progress. The following Saturday, Daniel had another visit with Emma. This time, she ran to him when she saw him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Dad! He hugged her tight, feeling something inside him break and heal at the same time. Hey, sweetheart. I brought you something. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Another drawing. This one showed a house with flowers and a rainbow. That's beautiful, he said. That's where you live now, right? In a house? Yeah, I do. Can I see it sometime? Daniel's throat tightened. Maybe. If your mom says it's okay. Emma nodded, then she looked up at him with serious eyes. Are you going to stay this time? Yeah, I am. Promise? Promise. They spent the hour playing games and talking. Emma told him about a school project on dinosaurs, and Daniel listened like it was the most important thing in the world. When the visit ended, Emma hugged him again. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Vanessa picked her up, and as they left, she paused at the door. You're doing better, she said. Trying to. Keep it up. It was the closest thing to encouragement Daniel had gotten from her in years. Outside, Lila was waiting. She looked up when he came out. Good visit? Yeah, really good. That's 2 in a row. Yeah, she smiled. You're getting the hang of this. That night, Daniel sat in his room and stared at the 2 drawings Emma had given him. He'd taped them to the wall above his bed. They were crooked and imperfect, but they were proof that someone believed in him. Lila knocked on the door. You awake? Yeah, come in. She sat on the edge of the bed. I've been thinking. About what? About what we talked about before. Helping people like you. What do you mean? People who are trying to fight for their kids but don't have the resources. What if we did something about that? Daniel frowned. Like what? I don't know. A support group maybe, or a resource network? Something to help parents who are stuck in the same place you were. I'm not exactly qualified to help anyone. You're more qualified than you think. You fought for your kid and won. That's more than most people can say. He thought about it. The idea felt too big, too ambitious. But there was something about it that made sense. How would it even work? We start small. Maybe just a meeting once a week. Share resources, give advice, help people navigate the system. Who's going to come to that? People who need it. Trust me, they're out there. Daniel wasn't convinced, but he didn't dismiss it either. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. Over the next few weeks, the idea kept nagging at him. He started noticing things, parents at the family services building who looked lost, people in online forums asking desperate questions about custody battles, men sitting alone in parking lots with the same hollow look Daniel had worn not long ago. Lila was right. They were everywhere. So one night, he and Lila made a flyer. Nothing fancy, just a simple notice about a support group for parents fighting for custody. They posted it at the family services building, at coffee shops, at the library. The first meeting, held in the common room of Mrs. Kovach's house, had 3 people show up. A single mom named Carla, who worked 2 jobs and couldn't afford a lawyer. A dad named Marcus, whose ex had moved across the state with his son. A grandmother named Ruth, who was raising her grandson after her daughter overdosed. They sat in a circle and shared their stories. Daniel listened, recognizing pieces of himself in every word. When it was his turn to talk, he told them about the van, the eviction, the court hearing. He didn't sugarcoat it. I'm not going to lie to you, he said. This is hard. It's going to stay hard, but showing up matters. Fighting matters. And you don't have to do it alone. Carla wiped her eyes. How did you do it? How did you keep going? Daniel glanced at Lila. I had help. And I stopped running. The meetings grew. 4 people became 6, then 10. They shared tips on finding affordable lawyers, navigating family court, staying sane in the middle of the chaos. It wasn't much, but it was something. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt like he was building something that mattered. 3 months in, the support group had become something Daniel hadn't expected. A community. Not a perfect one. Not some idealized version where everyone got along and problems solved themselves, but a messy, real collection of people who showed up for each other when it mattered. Marcus, the dad whose son had been moved across state lines, finally scraped together enough for a lawyer. Ruth convinced her daughter to go to rehab, though she relapsed twice before it stuck. Carla lost her custody case but won supervised visitation, which wasn't what she wanted but was better than nothing. They celebrated the wins and sat through the losses, and nobody pretended it was easy. Daniel found himself in a strange new role, someone people looked to for answers he didn't always have. It made him uncomfortable. He wasn't a counselor or a lawyer or anyone qualified to tell people how to live their lives. But Lila kept reminding him that experience counted for something. "You don't need a degree to help," she said one night after a particularly rough meeting where a guy named TJ broke down crying about losing his daughter to his ex's new husband. "You just need to have been through it. That doesn't mean I know what to tell him. You don't have to tell him anything, just listen." Daniel was learning that listening was harder than talking. It meant sitting with other people's pain and not trying to fix it, not offering hollow reassurances, just being present while they worked through the wreckage of their own lives. The van finally died in early June. Daniel had been driving back from a job site when the engine made a sound like a gunshot and smoke poured from under the hood. He coasted to the shoulder, killed the ignition, and sat there for a moment in the sudden silence. Lila, who'd been riding shotgun, looked at him. "Well, that's that. Yeah. You gonna miss it?" Daniel glanced around the interior, the cracked dashboard, the duct-taped upholstery, Emma's drawing still taped above the steering wheel. "Yeah, I am." They got out and stood on the side of the highway while cars blew past. The van looked smaller now, more pathetic, just a hunk of metal that had somehow carried them through the worst of it. "What do we do with it?" Lila asked. "Scrap it, I guess. Might get $100 if we're lucky." "You need $100? "Always." She smiled. "Then let's scrap it." They called a tow truck and watched the van get hauled away. Daniel felt a strange ache in his chest, like saying goodbye to something that had kept him alive when nothing else could. That night, he used the scrap money to buy a bicycle from a guy on Craigslist. It wasn't much. Rusted handlebars, squeaky brakes, a seat that felt like sitting on concrete, but it got him to work and back. Lila bought one too, a women's frame with a basket on the front. They looked ridiculous riding through the city together, two adults on bikes held together by rust and optimism. But it worked. The 6-month review hearing was scheduled for mid-July. Daniel had been dreading it and counting down to it in equal measure. This was his chance to prove he'd turned things around, to show the court he deserved more than supervised visits. Patricia laid it out plainly when they met a week before the hearing. "You've done well, stable housing, steady employment, consistent visitation. The court's going to see that. So I'll get shared custody." "Maybe. Depends on what Vanessa's lawyer argues and how the judge feels that day." That's not exactly reassuring. "It's realistic. You've come a long way, Daniel, but the court moves slowly. Don't expect everything to change overnight." Daniel nodded, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. He'd done everything right, or as right as he could manage, and it still might not be enough. Lila found him that night sitting on the front steps of Mrs. Kovich's house, staring at nothing. "You okay?" she asked, sitting down beside him. "I don't know. What if the judge says no?" "Then you keep going." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." He turned to look at her. "You ever get tired of being the optimistic one?" "Every day." "Then why do you keep doing it?" She was quiet for a moment, picking at a loose thread on her jeans. "Because someone has to, and you've got enough to worry about without me adding to it." "You don't have to carry that for me. I know. But I want to." Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he just sat with her in the quiet while the city hummed around them. The hearing was on a Thursday morning, same courthouse, same sterile smell of floor polish and tension. Vanessa was there with her lawyer looking calm and professional. Daniel wore the same thrift store shirt he'd worn to the first hearing, pressed and clean but showing its age. The judge reviewed the case file, asked a few questions, and listened to both lawyers make their arguments. Vanessa's lawyer emphasized stability, Emma's school, her friends, the consistency of living in one place. Patricia countered with Daniel's progress, his commitment, the bond he'd rebuilt with his daughter. Then the judge looked at Daniel. "Mr. Hayes, how many visits have you had with your daughter since our last hearing?" 22, Your Honor. "And how many did you miss?" "None." The judge made a note. "Your employment situation has stabilized?" "Yes, sir. I've been working steady for 4 months." "And your housing?" "I'm renting a room. It's not much, but it's stable." The judge nodded slowly, then turned to Vanessa. "Ms. Hayes, how has your daughter responded to these visits?" Vanessa hesitated, then said, She looks forward to them. She talks about her dad more now. I think it's been good for her. The judge looked surprised. So did Daniel. You're not contesting the request for shared custody? The judge asked. Vanessa glanced at her lawyer, who looked like he wanted to object, then back at the judge. No, I think Daniel's earned it. The courtroom went silent. Daniel felt his heart hammering in his chest. The judge reviewed his notes one more time, then said, I'm granting shared custody. Mr. Hayes will have his daughter every other weekend, unsupervised, with midweek visits on Wednesdays. We'll review again in 6 months. Daniel couldn't breathe. He heard Patricia say, Thank you, Your Honor, but it sounded distant, like he was underwater. Outside the courtroom, Vanessa was waiting. She looked tired, but not angry. Thank you, Daniel said. Don't thank me. You did the work. Still, you could have fought it. I know, but Emma deserves to have her dad in her life. And you've shown up. That matters. Daniel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Vanessa started to leave, then turned back. Don't screw this up, Daniel. I won't. Lila was leaning against the wall near the exit, arms crossed, a small smile on her face. When Daniel walked over, she said, Well, I got her every other weekend. Damn right you did. They walked out into the summer heat, and for the first time in what felt like years, Daniel felt like he could breathe all the way in. His first unsupervised weekend with Emma was 2 weeks later. He picked her up Friday evening, and she climbed into the back seat of Rick's truck. Daniel had borrowed it for the weekend in exchange for helping Rick move a refrigerator. Where are we going? Emma asked, buckling her seatbelt. Wherever you want. Really? Really? She thought about it, then said, The park with the big swings. You got it. They spent the evening at the park. Emma swung so high Daniel thought she might launch into orbit, then ran to the slide and went down backwards, laughing the whole way. Daniel pushed her on the merry-go-round until he was dizzy, then sat on a bench and watched her play. This was what he'd been fighting for. Not some abstract idea of fatherhood, but this. Watching his daughter be a kid, hearing her laugh, being the person she ran to when she scraped her knee on the sidewalk. That night, Emma slept on the couch in Daniel's room. He'd borrowed blankets from Mrs. Kovach and made a little nest for her. She fell asleep halfway through a movie, curled up with a stuffed bear Vanessa had packed. Daniel sat on the floor and watched her breathe, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him like a cloak. This was real now. Not supervised visits in a sterile room, but actual parenting, making sure she ate, brushing her hair, keeping her safe. He was terrified, but he was ready. Lila knocked softly and peeked her head in. She asleep? Yeah. You okay? I think so. She smiled. You're doing good, Daniel. Thanks. She closed the door and Daniel sat there in the dark, listening to his daughter breathe. The support group kept growing. By August, they had nearly 20 regular attendees. Mrs. Kovach had started calling it Daniel's meetings, which made him uncomfortable, but he didn't correct her. One night, a woman named Angela showed up. She was in her early 30s, thin and twitchy, with the look of someone who hadn't slept in days. She sat in the back and didn't say anything for the first hour. When it came time for introductions, she stood up. My name's Angela. I lost custody of my kids 3 months ago. I'm trying to get them back, but I don't know where to start. What happened? Carla asked gently. Angela's hand shook. I had a problem. Pills. I got clean, but the court doesn't believe me. My ex has full custody, and he's talking about moving out of state. The room went quiet. Daniel knew that look. The desperation, the fear of losing everything that mattered. How long have you been clean? He asked. 92 days. That's good. That's a start. It doesn't feel like enough. It's not about enough. It's about showing up and proving you're serious. Daniel leaned forward. You got a lawyer? I can't afford one. There are legal aid services. We can help you find one. Angela's eyes filled with tears. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Because someone helped me when I needed it, and because I know what it's like to feel like you're out of options. After the meeting, Lila pulled together a list of resources: legal aid clinics, addiction support groups, parenting classes that might help Angela's case. Angela took the list with shaking hands, thanked them both, and left. You think she'll make it? Lila asked. I don't know. but at least she's got a shot now. The weeks turned into months. Daniel's life settled into a rhythm. Work during the week, Emma every other weekend, support group meetings on Thursday nights. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, and stable felt like a miracle. Lila started taking classes at the community college. She didn't say much about it, but Daniel saw the textbooks on the coffee table: psychology, social work, counseling. She was building something for herself, same as he was. One night, after everyone had left the meeting, Daniel and Lila sat in the empty common room cleaning up coffee cups and folding chairs. "I've been thinking," Lila said. "About what?" "About making this bigger. The group, I mean. Maybe finding a real space, getting some funding, turning it into something official." Daniel stopped folding. "You serious?" "Yeah, people need this, and we're good at it." "We don't know what we're doing." "We know enough, and we can learn the rest." He thought about it. The idea was terrifying and exciting in equal measure. How would it even work? "I don't know yet, but I want to try. Do you?" Daniel looked around the room, the mismatched chairs, the coffee-stained table, the hand-drawn flyers taped to the walls. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, and it was helping people. "Yeah," he said, "I do." They started researching nonprofit status, grant applications, community partnerships. It was overwhelming, a mountain of paperwork and bureaucracy that made Daniel's head spin. But Lila attacked it with the same quiet determination she brought to everything else. By October, they'd submitted their first grant application to a local family services foundation. It was a long shot. They were asking for $10,000 to rent a space and cover operating costs for a year, but it was worth trying. The rejection letter came 6 weeks later, polite, professional, and crushing. "We appreciate your commitment to supporting families in crisis, but unfortunately, we are unable to fund your proposal at this time." Daniel crumpled the letter and threw it across the room. "That's it then." "No, it's not." "Lila, we tried. It didn't work. So we try again. Different foundation, different angle." "What's the point?" She picked up the crumpled letter and smoothed it out. "The point is that 20 people show up every week because this matters to them. The point is that Angela just got her kids back for supervised visits because we helped her find a lawyer. The point is that we're making a difference, even if some foundation doesn't see it yet." Daniel wanted to argue, but he couldn't. She was right. They applied to 3 more foundations. 2 said no. The third said maybe. They wanted to meet in person, see the operation, talk to the people they were helping. Daniel spent a week preparing, rehearsing what he'd say, trying to make the group sound more professional than it was. When the day came, he was so nervous he almost threw up in the parking lot. The foundation rep was a woman named Sharon, mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a notepad she wrote in constantly. She sat through an entire meeting, watching, listening, asking questions. Afterward, she pulled Daniel and Lila aside. "This is good work you're doing." "Thank you," Daniel said. "It's rough around the edges, but it's real. I can see that." She tapped her pen against her notepad. "I'm recommending we fund you. Not the full amount, maybe $5,000 to start, but it's a foot in the door." Daniel felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "Seriously?" "Seriously. You'll get the official letter in a few weeks, but I wanted you to know." After she left, Lila grabbed Daniel's arm. "We did it." "Yeah, we did." They stood there in the parking lot, 2 people who'd started with nothing and built something that mattered. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't huge, but it was real. That weekend, Emma asked Daniel what he'd been working on. "Just helping some people," he said. "What kind of people?" "Parents who are trying to be better, like me." Emma thought about that for a moment. "Are you better now?" "I'm trying to be." "I think you are." Daniel's throat tightened. "Thanks, sweetheart." She went back to coloring, and Daniel sat there watching her, feeling the full weight of how far he'd come. From a man running west in a dying van to someone his daughter believed in. It still wasn't perfect. He still struggled. Money was tight. The room was small. Some days he felt like he was one mistake away from losing everything again. But he wasn't running anymore. And that made all the difference. The grant money arrived in December, just before the holidays. $5,000 deposited into an account Daniel and Lila had opened specifically for the group. It felt surreal seeing that number on the screen, proof that someone believed in what they were building. They used the first chunk to rent a small office space above a laundromat on the east side. It wasn't much, 2 rooms with water-stained ceiling tiles and windows that didn't quite close all the way, but it was theirs. A place people could come to without worrying about taking up space in Mrs. Kovach's living room. Lila painted one wall a pale blue. Daniel installed better lighting. They bought folding chairs from a church that was closing down and a coffee maker from a thrift store. By the time they were done, it looked almost professional. Almost. The first meeting in the new space had 30 people show up. Some were regulars, others were new, drawn by flyers they'd posted around the city or word of mouth from people who'd been helped. Daniel stood at the front of the room and looked at the faces staring back at him, waiting for him to say something profound. He didn't have anything profound, so he just told the truth. A year ago, I was sleeping in a van with $17 to my name and a court date I was terrified of. I didn't think I'd make it. I didn't think I deserved to, but someone gave me a chance and I took it. And now I'm here, and so are you. So let's figure this out together. It wasn't poetry, but it was honest, and that seemed to be enough. Angela stood up. She'd gotten her kids back 2 months ago, supervised visits that had turned into weekends, then into shared custody. She looked healthier now, steadier, like someone who'd found solid ground after years of drowning. I just want to say thank you, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I don't know where I'd be without this place. Probably still lost. So thank you. Others echoed her. Marcus talked about how he'd driven 12 hours each way every other weekend to see his son, and how the advice from the group had helped him navigate an interstate custody battle he eventually won. Carla shared that she'd started taking night classes, trying to build a better life for when she finally got more time with her daughter. Listening to them, Daniel realized something he hadn't quite grasped before. This wasn't about him. It had never been about him. He'd just been the first one desperate enough to try, and Lila had been stubborn enough to make sure he didn't quit. But the group belonged to everyone who walked through that door looking for help. After the meeting, Lila found him standing by the window, looking out at the street below. You okay? She asked. Yeah, just thinking. About what? About how none of this was supposed to happen. I was just trying to survive. That's how most good things start. He turned to look at her. You ever going to tell me your story, the real one? She smiled, but there was sadness in it. Maybe someday. Fair enough. She moved to stand beside him, both of them watching the traffic crawl past. I've been thinking about something. What? About staying. Daniel glanced at her. You're already staying. I mean really staying. Not just crashing on your couch until I figure out my next move, actually putting down roots. What changed? I did. Or maybe I just stopped running long enough to realize I didn't want to keep running. What about your family, the people you left? Her jaw tightened. They don't own me anymore. I decided that. Daniel understood. Some things you didn't escape from. You just chose to stop letting them define you. For what it's worth, he said, I'm glad you stayed. Me too. Emma's 7th birthday fell on a Saturday in January. Daniel had her for the weekend and he'd been planning for weeks. Nothing extravagant. He didn't have the money for that. But something special. Something that would show her she mattered. He picked her up Friday evening. She climbed into the truck. Daniel had saved up and bought a used pickup from Rick, who'd sold it to him at cost, with a backpack full of overnight things and a grin that made Daniel's chest ache. Where are we going? She asked. It's a surprise. I don't like surprises. You'll like this one. He'd rented a small cabin 2 hours north of the city, near a lake that froze over in the winter. It was cheap in the off-season, and the owner had been willing to knock the price down even further when Daniel explained it was for his daughter's birthday. When they pulled up, Emma's eyes went wide. We're staying here? For the whole weekend. Just us? Just us. She ran inside before Daniel could even grab the bags. He found her in the bedroom, bouncing on the bed, laughing. Dad, this is so cool! He set the bags down and smiled. Yeah? Yeah. They spent the evening building a fire in the stone fireplace and roasting marshmallows that burned on the outside and stayed cold in the middle. Emma didn't care. She ate 3 of them, getting sticky sugar all over her face, and declared it the best dinner ever. That night they lay on the floor in front of the fire, wrapped in blankets, staring at the ceiling. Dad? Emma said. Yeah? Are you happy now? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? Mom said you were sad for a long time, but you seem different now. Daniel thought about how to answer that. I was sad. I still am sometimes. But yeah, I'm happier now. Because of me? You're a big part of it. She rolled over to look at him. What's the other part? Figuring out that running away doesn't fix things, and that asking for help isn't the same as giving up. Emma nodded like she understood, even though Daniel wasn't sure a 7-year-old could fully grasp what he meant. But she'd asked, and he told her the truth. That felt important. I'm glad you're happy, she said. Me too, sweetheart. The next day was her actual birthday. Daniel made pancakes that were lopsided and slightly burnt, which Emma thought was hilarious. They spent the afternoon exploring the woods around the cabin, Emma running ahead and shouting back discoveries. A frozen stream, a bird's nest, a tree that looked like it had a face. That night, Daniel brought out a small cake he'd hidden in the cooler. 7 candles, slightly crooked, stuck into vanilla frosting. Make a wish, he said. Emma closed her eyes, thought for a long moment, then blew out all the candles in one breath. What'd you wish for? Daniel asked. I can't tell you. It won't come true. Fair enough. Later, after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel sat by the fire and thought about wishes. About the things people wanted and the things they needed and how those weren't always the same. A year ago, he would have wished for money, for stability, for everything to stop being so hard. Now? He didn't know what he'd wish for. He had his daughter. He had a job. He had a purpose. It wasn't perfect, and it probably never would be. But it was enough. Back in the city, life kept moving. The support group continued to grow, and with it came new challenges. People needed more than just a place to talk. They needed legal advice, job training, childcare resources, mental health support. Daniel and Lila couldn't provide all of that, but they could connect people to others who could. Lila took the lead on building partnerships. She reached out to legal aid clinics, workforce development programs, therapists willing to offer sliding scale fees. She had a knack for it, a way of talking to people that made them want to help. Daniel suspected it came from years of navigating systems designed to keep people like her out. One evening, after a particularly long day, Lila came back to the office with a stack of business cards and a tired smile. I think I found us a lawyer, she said. For what? Pro bono work. He's willing to take on a few custody cases for people in the group who can't afford representation. Daniel stared at her. Seriously? Seriously. His name's Martin. He lost custody of his kid 10 years ago, never got him back. He wants to help people avoid what happened to him. That's huge. I know. Daniel shook his head in disbelief. How do you do this? Do what? Find people. Convince them to care. I just ask. Most people want to help. They just don't know how. It was a simple answer, but Daniel was learning that the best truths usually were. By spring, the group had helped 19 people navigate custody battles. Not all of them won. Some lost outright, some got partial custody, some were still fighting. But every single one of them said the same thing. They didn't feel alone anymore. Daniel kept working for Rick, pulling wire and fixing electrical systems in buildings all over the city. It was hard work, the kind that left his hands raw and his back aching, but it was honest. And it paid enough to cover rent and groceries and the occasional weekend trip with Emma. One afternoon, Rick pulled him aside at a job site. I've been thinking. About what? About making you a partner. Daniel blinked. What? You're good at this. Reliable. The clients like you. I'm getting old, and I need someone who can take over eventually. You interested? Yeah. I don't know what to say. Say yes or no. Yes, absolutely yes. Rick nodded. Good. We'll work out the details later, but you've earned it. Walking out of that job site, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not the arrogant kind, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing you've built something through sheer stubbornness and refusal to quit. That night, he told Lila. A partner, she said, grinning. That's big. Yeah. You deserve it. I don't know about that. I do. She'd been saying things like that more often lately. Small affirmations that Daniel was still learning to accept. He'd spent so long believing he was a failure that success felt foreign, like a language he didn't quite speak. But he was learning. The second custody review came in June. Daniel had been preparing for weeks, gathering pay stubs and letters of recommendation and documentation of every visit with Emma. Patricia seemed confident, but Daniel had learned not to trust confidence. The world had a way of pulling the rug out when you least expected it. The hearing was shorter this time. Vanessa's lawyer didn't fight as hard. Vanessa herself testified that Daniel had been consistent, responsible, and present in Emma's life. When the judge announced his decision, full shared custody, 50-50 time split, Daniel felt like he might pass out. "Congratulations, Mr. Hayes," the judge said. "You've worked hard for this. Don't make me regret it." "I won't, Your Honor." Outside, Vanessa waited by her car. She looked at Daniel with something that might have been respect. "You did it," she said. "We both did." "No, you did the work. I just stopped getting in the way." She paused. "Emma's lucky to have you." Daniel's throat tightened. "Thank you." She drove off, and Daniel stood there in the parking lot, letting it sink in. His daughter, half the time, a real, actual father instead of a visitor in her life. Lila was waiting at the office when he got there. She took one look at his face and knew. "You got it." "Yeah." She hugged him, tight and fierce, and Daniel let himself feel the full weight of the victory. It had taken a year and a half of clawing his way back from rock bottom, but he'd done it. Over the summer, Daniel and Emma fell into a new rhythm. She stayed with him every other week, and they built routines. Saturday morning pancakes, Wednesday night homework sessions, Sunday bike rides through the park. It wasn't always smooth. Emma had meltdowns. Daniel lost his patience. But they figured it out, one imperfect day at a time. The group kept growing. By August, they had enough funding to hire a part-time coordinator, a social work student named Maya, who brought fresh energy and new ideas. Daniel stepped back a little, letting Maya and Lila handle more of the day-to-day operations. He was still involved, still showed up to meetings, but he wasn't carrying it all himself anymore. It felt strange at first, letting go, but it also felt right. One evening in September, Daniel sat on the steps of the office with Lila, watching the sun set over the city. "You ever think about where you'd be if you hadn't stopped?" Lila asked. "Stopped what?" "Running." Daniel thought about it. "Probably dead, or close enough it wouldn't matter." "Yeah, me too." He looked at her. "You ever going to tell me what you were running from?" She was quiet for a long moment, then, "My family had money, a lot of it, and they thought that meant they could decide everything about my life. Who I married, what I studied, where I lived. I was engaged to a guy I didn't love because it made sense on paper. One day I just left, took whatever I could carry, and walked away." "Do you regret it?" "Not for a second." "They ever try to find you?" "For a while, but I made it clear I wasn't coming back. Eventually they stopped." Daniel nodded. "That takes guts." "So does what you did. I didn't have a choice." "Neither did I. That's the thing about hitting bottom. You either climb or you stay down. We climbed." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something instead of staying buried. By the time fall rolled around, Daniel had saved enough to move out of Mrs. Kovac's place. He found a small apartment on the west side, 2 bedrooms, so Emma could have her own space. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and safe in theirs. Lila found her own place a few blocks away. They still worked together at the office, still grabbed coffee most mornings, still showed up for each other when it mattered. But they had their own lives now, their own spaces. It felt healthy, like they were choosing to be in each other's lives instead of clinging to each other out of necessity. Emma loved the new apartment. Daniel let her pick the paint color for her room. She chose a bright purple that hurt his eyes, but made her smile every time she walked in. "This is really mine?" she asked. "Really yours." She flopped onto the bed, a second-hand frame Daniel had repainted, and stared at the ceiling. "I can't believe you have your own place." "Me neither, kiddo." "Are you going to stay this time?" The question hit harder than she probably meant it to. "Yeah, I'm going to stay." "Promise?" "Promise." That night after Emma fell asleep, Daniel stood in the doorway of her room and watched her breathe. He thought about how far they'd come, how many times he'd almost given up, how close he'd been to losing her forever. And he thought about the people who'd helped him, Lila, Rick, Patricia, the strangers at rest stops and pawn shops who'd shown him kindness when he didn't deserve it. The community that had grown around the support group, all of them broken in different ways, all of them trying to find their way back. Here's the thing about hitting rock bottom that nobody tells you. It doesn't make you stronger. It just shows you how much you're willing to endure. And sometimes that's enough. Daniel had endured. He'd faced down his worst fears, losing his daughter, losing himself, becoming the kind of man his father had been. And he'd come out the other side not perfect, not fixed, but present, trying, showing up. That was the real work, not the grand gestures or the dramatic turnarounds, just the daily choice to keep going even when it would be easier to quit. The support group celebrated its one-year anniversary in November. They threw a small party at the office, pizza, cheap wine, a cake that Maya had decorated with clumsy frosting letters that said, "We made it." People told their stories. Angela talked about how her kids were thriving now, how she'd been sober for over a year. Marcus showed pictures of his son's recent visit. Ruth shared that her daughter had completed rehab and was working on rebuilding their relationship. Daniel stood at the front of the room and looked at the faces around him, people who'd walked in broken and were slowly piecing themselves back together. "I'm not good at speeches," he said, "but I want you all to know something. A year and a half ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. And then I met someone who showed me that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was survival. So I asked, and people helped, and now we're here, helping each other." He paused, feeling the emotion rise in his chest. "None of us are perfect. We're all still figuring this out, but we're doing it together, and that matters." The room erupted in applause. Lila caught his eye from across the room and smiled. Later, after everyone had left, Daniel and Lila cleaned up in comfortable silence. "You know what I think?" Lila said, tossing paper plates into a trash bag. "What?" "I think we actually did something good here." "Yeah, I think we did." She looked at him. "You ever think about what comes next?" "Sometimes, but I'm trying to just focus on right now." "That's probably smart." They finished cleaning and locked up the office. Outside, the city was quiet, the streets empty except for the occasional car passing by. "You want to grab dinner?" Lila asked. "Yeah, I'd like that." They walked down the block together, two people who'd found each other by accident and stayed by choice. The conversation drifted from work to Emma to nothing in particular, the kind of easy talk that comes when you've stopped trying to impress each other. Daniel thought about the journey that had brought him here, the desperation, the fear, the moments when giving up seemed like the only option. He thought about the van, the highway stretching west, the belief that running was the same as surviving. He'd been wrong about that. Survival wasn't about running, it was about stopping, about turning around and facing the things you were afraid of, about asking for help and accepting it when it came, about showing up day after day, even when you felt like you had nothing left to give. It wasn't easy. Some days it still felt impossible, but he was here. Emma was here. Lila was here. The group was here. All of them broken and healing and trying, and that was enough. Because here's what Daniel had learned. Life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't care if you're scared or unprepared or convinced you're going to fail. It just keeps moving, and you either move with it or you get left behind. He'd almost been left behind, but he'd grabbed onto something, a stranger's kindness, a daughter's love, a community of people who understood what it meant to fight for the things that mattered. And he'd held on. And now walking down a quiet street with someone who'd become more than a friend, with a daughter waiting at home and a future that wasn't perfect but was his, Daniel Hayes finally understood what it meant to stop running. It meant being present, being honest, being willing to fail and try again. It meant showing up not because you had all the answers, but because someone needed you to. It meant being human. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The grant money arrived in December, just before the holidays. $5,000 deposited into an account Daniel and Lila had opened specifically for the group. It felt surreal, seeing that number on the screen, proof that someone believed in what they were building. They used the first chunk to rent a small office space above a laundromat on the east side. It wasn't much. 2 rooms with water-stained ceiling tiles and windows that didn't quite close all the way, but it was theirs. A place people could come to without worrying about taking up space in Mrs. Kovach's living room. Lila painted one wall a pale blue. Daniel installed better lighting. They bought folding chairs from a church that was closing down and a coffee maker from a thrift store. By the time they were done, it looked almost professional. Almost. The first meeting in the new space had 30 people show up. Some were regulars, others were new, drawn by flyers they'd posted around the city or word of mouth from people who'd been helped. Daniel stood at the front of the room and looked at the faces staring back at him, waiting for him to say something profound. He didn't have anything profound, so he just told the truth. A year ago, I was sleeping in a van with $17 to my name and a court date I was terrified of. I didn't think I'd make it. I didn't think I deserved to, but someone gave me a chance and I took it, and now I'm here, and so are you, so let's figure this out together. It wasn't poetry, but it was honest, and that seemed to be enough. Angela stood up. She'd gotten her kids back 2 months ago, supervised visits that had turned into weekends, then into shared custody. She looked healthier now, steadier, like someone who'd found solid ground after years of drowning. "I just want to say thank you," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't know where I'd be without this place, probably still lost. So thank you." Others echoed her. Marcus talked about how he'd driven 12 hours each way every other weekend to see his son, and how the advice from the group had helped him navigate an interstate custody battle he eventually won. Carla shared that she'd started taking night classes, trying to build a better life for when she finally got more time with her daughter. Listening to them, Daniel realized something he hadn't quite grasped before. This wasn't about him. It had never been about him. He'd just been the first one desperate enough to try, and Lila had been stubborn enough to make sure he didn't quit. But the group belonged to everyone who walked through that door looking for help. After the meeting, Lila found him standing by the window, looking out at the street below. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About how none of this was supposed to happen. I was just trying to survive." "That's how most good things start." He turned to look at her. "You ever going to tell me your story? The real one?" She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Maybe someday." "Fair enough." She moved to stand beside him, both of them watching the traffic crawl past. "I've been thinking about something." "What?" "About staying." Daniel glanced at her. "You're already staying. I mean really staying, not just crashing on your couch until I figure out my next move, actually putting down roots." "What changed?" "I did. Or maybe I just stopped running long enough to realize I didn't want to keep running." "What about your family, the people you left?" Her jaw tightened. "They don't own me anymore. I decided that." Daniel understood. Some things you didn't escape from. You just chose to stop letting them define you. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm glad you stayed." "Me too." Emma's 7th birthday fell on a Saturday in January. Daniel had her for the weekend, and he'd been planning for weeks. Nothing extravagant, he didn't have the money for that, but something special. Something that would show her she mattered. He picked her up Friday evening. She climbed into the truck. Daniel had saved up and bought a used pickup from Rick, who'd sold it to him at cost, with a backpack full of overnight things and a grin that made Daniel's chest ache. "Where are we going?" she asked. "It's a surprise." "I don't like surprises." "You'll like this one." He'd rented a small cabin 2 hours north of the city, near a lake that froze over in the winter. It was cheap in the off-season, and the owner had been willing to knock the price down even further when Daniel explained it was for his daughter's birthday. When they pulled up, Emma's eyes went wide. "We're staying here?" "For the whole weekend." "Just us?" "Just us." She ran inside before Daniel could even grab the bags. He found her in the bedroom, bouncing on the bed, laughing. "Dad, this is so cool." He set the bags down and smiled. "Yeah?" "Yeah." They spent the evening building a fire in the stone fireplace and roasting marshmallows that burned on the outside and stayed cold in the middle. Emma didn't care. She ate 3 of them, getting sticky sugar all over her face, and declared it the best dinner ever. That night they lay on the floor in front of the fire, wrapped in blankets, staring at the ceiling. "Dad?" Emma said. "Yeah?" "Are you happy now?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "Mom said you were sad for a long time, but you seem different now." Daniel thought about how to answer that. "I was sad. I still am sometimes. But, yeah, I'm happier now." "Because of me?" "You're a big part of it." She rolled over to look at him. "What's the other part?" "Figuring out that running away doesn't fix things, and that asking for help isn't the same as giving up." Emma nodded like she understood, even though Daniel wasn't sure a 7-year-old could fully grasp what he meant. But she'd asked, and he told her the truth. That felt important. "I'm glad you're happy," she said. "Me too, sweetheart." The next day was her actual birthday. Daniel made pancakes that were lopsided and slightly burnt, which Emma thought was hilarious. They spent the afternoon exploring the woods around the cabin, Emma running ahead and shouting back discoveries: a frozen stream, a bird's nest, a tree that looked like it had a face. That night, Daniel brought out a small cake he'd hidden in the cooler. 7 candles, slightly crooked, stuck into vanilla frosting. "Make a wish," he said. Emma closed her eyes, thought for a long moment, then blew out all the candles in one breath. "What'd you wish for?" Daniel asked. "I can't tell you. It won't come true." "Fair enough." Later, after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel sat by the fire and thought about wishes, about the things people wanted and the things they needed, and how those weren't always the same. A year ago, he would have wished for money, for stability, for everything to stop being so hard. Now, he didn't know what he'd wish for. He had his daughter, he had a job, he had a purpose. It wasn't perfect, and it probably never would be. But it was enough. Back in the city, life kept moving. The support group continued to grow, and with it came new challenges. People needed more than just a place to talk. They needed legal advice, job training, childcare resources, mental health support. Daniel and Lila couldn't provide all of that, but they could connect people to others who could. Lila took the lead on building partnerships. She reached out to legal aid clinics, workforce development programs, therapists willing to offer sliding scale fees. She had a knack for it, a way of talking to people that made them want to help. Daniel suspected it came from years of navigating systems designed to keep people like her out. One evening, after a particularly long day, Lila came back to the office with a stack of business cards and a tired smile. "I think I found us a lawyer," she said. "For what?" "Pro bono work. He's willing to take on a few custody cases for people in the group who can't afford representation." Daniel stared at her. "Seriously?" "Seriously. His name's Martin. He lost custody of his kid 10 years ago, never got him back. He wants to help people avoid what happened to him." "That's huge." "I know." Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "How do you do this?" "Do what?" "Find people. Convince them to care." "I just ask. Most people want to help. They just don't know how." It was a simple answer, but Daniel was learning that the best truths usually were. By spring, the group had helped 19 people navigate custody battles. Not all of them won. Some lost outright, some got partial custody, some were still fighting. But every single one of them said the same thing. They didn't feel alone anymore. Daniel kept working for Rick, pulling wire and fixing electrical systems in buildings all over the city. It was hard work, the kind that left his hands raw and his back aching, but it was honest. And it paid enough to cover rent and groceries and the occasional weekend trip with Emma. One afternoon, Rick pulled him aside at a job site. "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About making you a partner." Daniel blinked. "What?" "You're good at this. Reliable. The clients like you. I'm getting old and I need someone who can take over eventually. You interested?" "I don't know what to say." "Say yes or no." "Yes, absolutely yes." Rick nodded. "Good. We'll work out the details later, but you've earned it." Walking out of that job site, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Not the arrogant kind, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing you've built something through sheer stubbornness and refusal to quit. That night, he told Lila. "A partner," she said, grinning. "That's big." "Yeah. You deserve it." "I don't know about that." "I do." She'd been saying things like that more often lately, small affirmations that Daniel was still learning to accept. He'd spent so long believing he was a failure that success felt foreign, like a language he didn't quite speak. But he was learning. The second custody review came in June. Daniel had been preparing for weeks, gathering pay stubs and letters of recommendation and documentation of every visit with Emma. Patricia seemed confident, but Daniel had learned not to trust confidence. The world had a way of pulling the rug out when you least expected it. The hearing was shorter this time. Vanessa's lawyer didn't fight as hard. Vanessa herself testified that Daniel had been consistent, responsible, and present in Emma's life. When the judge announced his decision, full shared custody, 50-50 time split. Daniel felt like he might pass out. "Congratulations, Mr. Hayes," the judge said. "You've worked hard for this. Don't make me regret it." "I won't, Your Honor." Outside, Vanessa waited by her car. She looked at Daniel with something that might have been respect. "You did it," she said. "We both did." "No, you did the work. I just stopped getting in the way." She paused. "Emma's lucky to have you." Daniel's throat tightened. "Thank you." She drove off, and Daniel stood there in the parking lot, letting it sink in. His daughter, half the time, a real, actual father instead of a visitor in her life. Lila was waiting at the office when he got there. She took one look at his face and knew. "You got it." "Yeah." She hugged him, tight and fierce, and Daniel let himself feel the full weight of the victory. It had taken 18 months of clawing his way back from rock bottom, but he'd done it. Over the summer, Daniel and Emma fell into a new rhythm. She stayed with him every other week, and they built routines: Saturday morning pancakes, Wednesday night homework sessions, Sunday bike rides through the park. It wasn't always smooth. Emma had meltdowns. Daniel lost his patience. But they figured it out, one imperfect day at a time. The group kept growing. By August, they had enough funding to hire a part-time coordinator, a social work student named Maya, who brought fresh energy and new ideas. Daniel stepped back a little, letting Maya and Lila handle more of the day-to-day operations. He was still involved, still showed up to meetings, but he wasn't carrying it all himself anymore. It felt strange at first, letting go, but it also felt right. One evening in September, Daniel sat on the steps of the office with Lila, watching the sun set over the city. "You ever think about where you'd be if you hadn't stopped?" Lila asked. "Stopped what?" "Running." Daniel thought about it. "Probably dead, or close enough it wouldn't matter." "Yeah, me too." He looked at her. "You ever going to tell me what you were running from?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My family had money. A lot of it. And they thought that meant they could decide everything about my life. Who I married, what I studied, where I lived. I was engaged to a guy I didn't love because it made sense on paper. One day I just walked away. Took whatever I could carry and left." "Do you regret it?" "Not for a second." "They ever try to find you?" "For a while, but I made it clear I wasn't coming back. Eventually they stopped." Daniel nodded. "That takes guts." "So does what you did." "I didn't have a choice." "Neither did I. That's the thing about hitting bottom. You either climb or you stay down. We climbed." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something instead of staying buried. By the time fall rolled around, Daniel had saved enough to move out of Mrs. Kovach's place. He found a small apartment on the west side, 2 bedrooms so Emma could have her own space. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and safe and theirs. Lila found her own place a few blocks away. They still worked together at the office, still grabbed coffee most mornings, still showed up for each other when it mattered. But they had their own lives now, their own spaces. It felt healthy, like they were choosing to be in each other's lives instead of clinging to each other out of necessity. Emma loved the new apartment. Daniel let her pick the paint color for her room. She chose a bright purple that hurt his eyes, but made her smile every time she walked in. "This is really mine?" she asked. "Really yours." She flopped onto the bed, a second-hand frame Daniel had repainted, and stared at the ceiling. "I can't believe you have your own place." "Me neither, kiddo." "Are you going to stay this time?" The question hit harder than she probably meant it to. "Yeah, I'm going to stay." "Promise?" "Promise." That night, after Emma fell asleep, Daniel stood in the doorway of her room and watched her breathe. He thought about how far they'd come, how many times he'd almost given up, how close he'd been to losing her forever. The support group celebrated its 1-year anniversary in November. They threw a small party at the office: pizza, cheap wine, a cake that Maya had decorated with clumsy frosting letters that said, "We made it." People told their stories. Angela talked about how her kids were thriving now, how she'd been sober for 14 months. Marcus showed pictures of his son's recent visit. Ruth shared that her daughter had completed rehab and was working on rebuilding their relationship. Daniel stood at the front of the room and looked at the faces around him. People who'd walked in broken and were slowly piecing themselves back together. "I'm not good at speeches," he said, "but I want you all to know something. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. And then I met someone who showed me that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was survival. So I asked, and people helped. And now we're here, helping each other." He paused, feeling the emotion rise in his chest. None of us are perfect. We're all still figuring this out, but we're doing it together. And that matters. The room erupted in applause. Lila caught his eye from across the room and smiled. Later, after everyone had left, Daniel and Lila cleaned up in comfortable silence. "You know what I think?" Lila said, tossing paper plates into a trash bag. "What?" "I think we actually did something good here." "Yeah, I think we did." She looked at him. "You ever think about what comes next?" "Sometimes, but I'm trying to just focus on right now." "That's probably smart." They finished cleaning and locked up the office. Outside, the city was quiet, the streets empty except for the occasional car passing by. "You want to grab dinner?" Lila asked. "Yeah, I'd like that." They walked down the block together, two people who'd found each other by accident and stayed by choice. The conversation drifted from work to Emma to nothing in particular, the kind of easy talk that comes when you've stopped trying to impress each other. A few weeks later, Daniel got a call from Patricia. She'd been contacted by a local news station doing a story on grassroots community programs. They wanted to feature the support group. Daniel's first instinct was to say no. He didn't want attention, didn't want to be held up as some kind of success story when he still felt like he was barely holding things together. But Lila convinced him. "It's not about you," she said. "It's about the people we're helping. If the story brings more people in who need help, isn't that worth it?" She was right. She usually was. The interview aired on a Tuesday evening. Daniel watched it at home with Emma, who thought it was weird seeing her dad on TV. The reporter had done a good job, focused on the people the group had helped, not on Daniel himself. Angela was interviewed, and Marcus, and a woman named Sheila, who just won back custody of her twin boys. The segment ended with Daniel saying, "We're just trying to show people they're not alone. That's all any of us can do." The response was immediate. By the next morning, the office phone had a dozen voicemails from people asking how to join, from organizations wanting to partner, from donors wanting to contribute. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once. Over the next few months, the group doubled in size. They had to move to a bigger space, hire another part-time coordinator, set up a proper website. Daniel found himself doing things he never thought he'd do, writing grant proposals, speaking at community events, coordinating with city officials about policy changes that could help struggling parents. It was exhausting, but it was also the most meaningful work he'd ever done. By the time spring came around again, Daniel had been working as Rick's partner for almost a year. The business was growing. They'd hired 2 more electricians and were bidding on bigger contracts. Daniel still worked in the field most days, but he was also learning the business side, the parts Rick would eventually hand over when he retired. One afternoon, Rick pulled him aside after a job. "I've been meaning to tell you something." "What's that?" "You've done good. Better than I expected, honestly. I wasn't sure you'd stick it out when I first hired you. You looked like you were about 2 bad days from falling apart." "I was." "But you didn't, and that says something." Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. "I'm planning to retire in a couple of years," Rick continued. "When I do, this is yours if you want it. Full ownership. We'll work out a payment plan that makes sense." Daniel stared at him. "You serious?" "Dead serious. You've earned it." Walking to his truck that evening, Daniel felt the weight of it all settle over him. 2 years ago, he'd been a man with nothing. Now he had a daughter, a business, a community of people depending on him. It should have felt overwhelming, and sometimes it did, but mostly it just felt right. Emma turned 8 that January. This time, Daniel threw her a proper birthday party, invited her friends from school, rented a bounce house, made a cake that didn't collapse. Vanessa came, and Craig, and even Lila showed up with a present wrapped in purple paper. Watching Emma laugh with her friends, blowing out candles surrounded by people who loved her, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, exactly. That was too simple a word. But peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've done right by the people who matter. Later, after everyone had left and Emma was asleep on the couch, Vanessa lingered by the door. "This was nice," she said. "Yeah, it was." "You've really turned things around, Daniel." "I'm trying." "No, you have." Emma sees it. I see it. She paused. I'm proud of you. Those words hit him harder than he expected. Thank you. She left, and Daniel cleaned up the remains of the party, deflating the bounce house, throwing away paper plates, wiping frosting off the kitchen counter. It was mundane work, the kind he used to hate. But now it felt like proof of something, proof that he had a life worth cleaning up after. The support group kept evolving. They added workshops on resume building, financial literacy, co-parenting strategies. They partnered with therapists who donated their time. They created a resource library with legal templates and court preparation guides. It wasn't perfect, but it was helping people in real, tangible ways. One Thursday night, a man named James showed up. He was in his 40s, looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He sat in the back and didn't say anything for the first hour. When it came time for newcomers to introduce themselves, he stood up. My name's James. I just lost custody of my 2 daughters. The judge said I wasn't stable enough. And he's probably right. I don't have a job. I'm staying with a friend. I don't know what I'm doing here, honestly. I just saw the flyer and thought maybe someone could tell me how to fix this. Daniel recognized that look, that desperation. He'd worn it himself not that long ago. You're in the right place, Daniel said. We can't fix it for you, but we can help you figure out how to fix it yourself. James nodded, eyes wet. I just want my girls back. I know. We all do. That's why we're here. After the meeting, Daniel pulled James aside and gave him the same advice Lila had given him 2 years ago. First thing you need is a job. Any job. Doesn't matter if it's what you want, just something that shows the court you're trying. Then you need a place to stay that's yours. After that, you start showing up for visits. Every single one. You prove you're reliable. What if I screw it up? You might, but you get back up and try again. That's all any of us can do. James left with a list of resources and a little bit of hope. Whether he'd use it was up to him. Watching him walk out, Lila came up beside Daniel. You remember when that was you? Every day? Look how far you've come. We've come, she smiled. Yeah, we have. That summer, Daniel took Emma on a road trip. Nothing fancy, just a week driving through the Midwest, stopping at roadside attractions and cheap motels. They saw the world's largest ball of twine, ate ice cream at a diner that claimed to have the best milkshakes in 3 states, got lost twice trying to find a waterfall Emma had read about online. One night, sitting outside a motel in South Dakota, Emma asked, Dad, do you ever think about when you left? Daniel was surprised by the question. Sometimes. Why? I used to be really mad at you. I know, you had every right to be, but I'm not anymore. I think I get it now. Get what? That sometimes people need to leave so they can figure out how to stay. Daniel's throat tightened. Who told you that? Nobody. I just thought about it. He pulled her close. You're pretty smart, you know that? I know. They sat there under a sky full of stars, and Daniel thought about all the roads he'd traveled, the ones that led away and the ones that led back. The difference he'd learned wasn't in the direction. It was in the decision to turn around. By the time they returned to the city, Daniel knew what he wanted to do. He called a meeting with Lila and Maya. I've been thinking about something, he said. Here we go, Lila said, grinning. What if we expand? Not just the support group, but the whole operation. What if we created a program that helps people get back on their feet? Job placement, housing assistance, legal support, all of it? Maya leaned forward. Like a one-stop shop? Exactly. That's ambitious, Lila said. I know, but we've got the foundation, we've got the connections, we've proven it works. Why not go bigger? They talked for hours, mapping out what it would take. More funding, more staff, a bigger space. It was daunting, but it was also exactly what people needed. Over the next year, they made it happen. They applied for grants, pitched to donors, built partnerships with local businesses. By the following fall, they'd opened the doors to what they called the Second Chance Center, a place where people could get help rebuilding their lives after hitting rock bottom. Daniel didn't run it full-time. He still worked with Rick, still spent every other week with Emma. But he was there when it mattered, helping people navigate the same systems that had almost broken him. And slowly, one person at a time, they were making a difference. One evening, Daniel stood in the center's main room, watching people come and go. A woman picking up job listings, a man meeting with a lawyer, a father playing with his daughter in the corner while he waited for his appointment. Lila came up beside him. "You did this. We did this. Yeah, we did." They stood there in comfortable silence, two people who'd saved each other without ever saying it out loud. "You ever regret it?" Daniel asked. "Walking away from your old life?" "Not once. You?" "No, I just wish I'd done it sooner." "You did it when you were ready. That's all that matters." Daniel thought about that, about timing and choices and the way life has a habit of pushing you toward the things you need, even when you're running in the opposite direction. He thought about the van, about the highway stretching west, about the moment Lila knocked on his window and asked if he was heading that direction. How one choice, one moment of saying yes instead of no, had changed everything. He thought about Emma, about the custody battles and the supervised visits and the slow, painful process of earning back what he'd almost lost. About the group, about the people they'd helped, about the center they'd built from nothing. And he thought about the future, not as something to fear, but as something to build. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one step at a time. Because here's the truth. Nobody tells you when you're at your lowest. Rock bottom isn't the end. It's just the place where you finally stop digging and start climbing. And the climb is hard. It's brutal. It's full of setbacks and failures and moments when you want to give up. But if you keep going, if you ask for help, if you show up even when you feel like you have nothing left to give, eventually you'll find yourself somewhere you never thought you'd be, standing in a room you built, surrounded by people you helped, holding on to the things that matter. Not perfect, not polished, not some fairy tale ending where everything works out exactly how you planned. Just real, just human, just enough. And for Daniel Hayes, who'd once thought he'd lost everything that mattered, that was more than he'd ever hoped for. It was everything.